Hey there, welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Robert Winters.
Judy Nathans, co-host.
And we have a guest today.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jake Crutchfield. I'm a candidate for school committee.
Yay.
Right, and today is October 10th, correct?
Right.
2017. Sometimes I'm off by a decade here, so
Right.
it's bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Right, so for the 2017 election, for those looking at this in the archives, in the year 2027. Right?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, so Jake, this is your second time as a candidate.
Second time running.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, and why don't you tell folks just a little bit about where you come from and what you're about? And
Sorry,
That's
Judy.
okay.
Judy mentioned earlier that, I didn't really post too much on my website about it, and that's a great point. So I actually grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts.
Oh,
So a little
okay.
bit down the way on 95. And that's where I spent basically my whole childhood up until after high school.
Public high school?
Yep.
I mean public school.
Public school the whole time there.
Yeah.
Yep. Then I went on to the University of Connecticut. And there I got my undergraduate degree in finance with a minor in political science. And so actually right out of school, I went into work as a financial advisor.
I saw that on your...
Yeah, I did that job for a year and some change, and I'll be honest,
You didn't like it?
Yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
sit too well with me.
Yeah.
And then, basically I was kind of at a crossroads, and a cousin of mine who was living abroad with his girlfriend at the time in China said, you should try moving to China,
yeah, you went
and
to
you
China.
should become a teacher.
Right.
Sure enough, a month later, I was there.
What
China?
year was
In China.
that?
Oh yeah.
What year was
That must have been 2012,
Wow,
2011.
not too
yeah.
long ago. Wow.
Yeah. So and then that's where I started my teaching career.
My
Was
goodness.
in Beijing, China, and I taught everything you can imagine from the
Wow.
wee little ones to Chinese vice presidents of their financial banks.
Goodness. Now, do you speak Chinese at all?
Not a lick of
No.
it.
now I've always said, because I've taught for many, many years, there are sort of cultural differences. I mean, certainly the type of respect you get as a teacher in some parts of the world. Like, for example, some of the students I've had who are China or from China, or their parents were from China, they would, at the end of a semester, they would want to give me gifts.
Oh yeah.
Did they bow?
Whereas in America, if a student gives you gifts, it is looked upon as a bribe.
Yeah.
So there's a culture clash.
There is that. It's funny though, the bank workers that I worked with, because I was so young when I was there, they used to call me Baby Lauscher, and
Oh.
that Lauscher is teacher in Chinese.
Oh,
so.
Russian teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, baby. Oh, that's funny.
Did you learn much of the language?
I learned basically enough to count and to bargain so I could get by with buying food and things.
What I've heard is that people that actually teach English do not necessarily have to know or do know
Yeah,
the
the
language.
language,
'Cause
no.
I know people,
Yeah,
so it's
Exactly.
interesting.
But and then it's from that experience that I fell in love with teaching, and that's when I decided that.
You went to Leslie.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to get my master's degree in it, and that's where I attended Leslie University. And my focus was in political science and high school history.
So are you sort of like the rest of us who came here for school and then stayed?
Too far.
Right.
It's actually so. Prior to leaving for China, I did live in Cambridge for a little spot of time. But yes, I did definitely come here for school, and that's part of where I fell in love with the city. And while I was getting my master's degree, that's when I started my work as a substitute teacher in Cambridge.
Right, I saw that you've done that for a few years.
and-
I mean, is it ideally, would you want to be a history teacher? Or?
That's a great question. I go back and forth.
Yeah.
The past 2 years, I worked a lot in an elementary school. I was at the Cambridgeport Elementary School, and I was their full-time building sub. And I really enjoyed working with elementary school students.
Sure, they're a little more innocent. A little bit.
But I really do enjoy the content that you can dive into a little bit
Right, the
deeper.
intellectual challenge.
That's not to say that you can't expose younger students to the same content,
Right.
but
It's a little different.
definitely a little different. But definitely, I would consider at some point going back to become a history teacher. It's definitely one of my first passions.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Nice.
But really, it's all that time subbing that I fell in love with the school district too. It was. I tell this to everyone that's interested in education, and I'll tell it to everybody here.
Right.
The best experience you can get, especially if you're in graduate school to become a teacher, is subbing.
Yeah.
There's no better
That's a
way
good
to
point.
jump into the deep end and
you
to
can see things sort of objectively because you're not part of the system necessarily. And because I subbed a lot when I was younger, but
Oh yeah, no, and it's really great work. You know, if you got the stomach for it.
true. Yeah.
Actually, in a similar way, because I've been teaching for decades, but I got started just as a tutor. Not as a tutor, like actually working at a math lab where it was like a drop-in
Assisting
question center,
somebody, yeah.
and it kind of sharpens your skills because they come in and ask you anything, and you just got to be ready.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
totally.
It's comparable in that
Same way for a sub, you know.
You got to know their names. That's what I learned. You have to write down their names and their seating chart because once you know their name, they don't pull as much stuff.
Exactly,
You know?
and you know, I definitely had tricks to memorize names quickly.
Oh yeah,
and,
I'm still good at that. Yeah.
and you know,
Study.
but it's definitely a lot of thinking on your feet,
Yeah.
learning a lot of the
Sure.
the rules of the classroom, the culture
Right.
of the school, things like that,
Right,
very
'cause
quickly.
even within Cambridge, the cultures are
Right.
different.
Oh yeah, I mean the schools are very, very different.
No, I don't actually have the roster, or maybe I do somewhere, of all the school committee candidates or people who are currently in the school
No, we
committee.
can look on your.
But you know, not everybody who runs for school committee or serves on the school committee has a background in actual teaching.
Well, that's a
Some
good
do,
point.
some don't.
You're right.
Right? So I don't know if I haven't made a count. I haven't sort of said.
Yeah.
husband to,
That's
yes,
true.
no,
I
no,
never
yes,
thought
yes,
about
yes.
that.
I think there's a
wonder-
few people
do
that
you
have
know-
had a background in teaching. I know David Weinstein definitely has
Right.
a background. Peter, I think, has a background. Lawrence, I think, has a
Kimbrough, right,
Kimbrough
that's
has a
right.
background.
Yes.
And those are the ones that jump off at the top of my head. But
Right.
as far as in the Cambridge public schools, I think it's just Lawrence and myself.
Interesting.
right.
Okay.
And definitely, you know, something that I always tell
Yeah.
people when I'm out knocking on doors is being able to see all of the schools gave me
That's
a really
right.
great perspective of a lot of the things that are going on.
That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely. So
Oh, well then, wait a minute. We got,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will went to the school.
Well, yeah. And so did the Lecce. So, yes.
Right.
that's
but-
right.
right,
So,
so-
so
Those
from a
guys-
student's point of
And-
view,
They
right?
yeah.
have the student
Okay.
perspective, which
The
is
student perspective,
very important
right,
as well.
very different.
Oh yeah, no,
But that's
but
true.
very
You're
different,
right.
very important.
You're right.
All right,
Yeah.
so there's always the question that comes to mind, you know, which is that, you know, you can be a student in a school, you could be a parent of children in a school, you can be a teacher in a school, but what drives a person to make this insane decision
Right, to be on
to
school.
be a candidate for
Really.
school?
I don't know if it's insane.
I was thinking the same.
Yeah, no, you know, I think what I realized is I started kind of just getting involved in the community and even attending the school committee meetings myself.
Yeah, well,
and
that's
really,
important.
Yeah, and what I noticed was just that there aren't really teachers, so that perspective wasn't represented there, and really there wasn't anyone my own age. You know, I'm 30 myself. At the time I first
Oh,
ran, I
same
was
age
like,
as my daughter.
when I was 28.
Wow.
And I felt like
Yeah.
that was also an important perspective to
Yeah.
have on there because a lot of our work is for
Mm-hmm.
students that are, you know, closer to my age. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to, you know, I grew up in the same kind of technology
Sure.
bubble that they did. And I think that's important as well.
In other words, you didn't see film strips.
Uh,
Like,
You're not that old. Some
no,
of them are, but
we
not
were
really.
right on the cusp of when they first introduced typing.
Ah,
yes,
ah,
yes.
Yeah,
right.
computer typing.
Right.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, and you know, I think part of why you often don't see school committee members that are teachers is because it's kind of a catch-22, right? Because I think running for it takes you out of the classroom.
That's right.
So you know,
You would have had to, right, been out of. not-
yeah. So I'm not teaching in the schools now.
Sure. Yeah,
but
makes sense, yeah.
you know, which is. I'll be real with you and tell you it was a really hard choice for me because I
you really
I loved
like
it.
it.
Yeah, no, it was the
It's
passion.
also income too, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I worked over the summer actually
Okay,
for a program.
so it would take some time.
Yeah, but you know, it's really that kind of catch-22 situation where teachers are passionate, they want to be in the classroom,
Yeah,
and the investment both for teaching and then the investment I think for being on school committee takes up a lot of time, and I don't know if it's really easy to do the both of them.
Well, actually, I think that there may even be some prohibition. I don't know if it's absolute
yeah,
prohibition.
actually, that's a
so
good
you
point.
can't,
You can't be an active
work,
teacher,
yeah,
right?
in this
In this
district.
district.
Yeah.
Oh, in this
And I
district.
think like Robin Harris, when she was on the school committee, she
Oh,
was
that's right,
actually
she was-
working
she was-
elsewhere.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
actually,
you're
she's a
right.
principal.
Yeah, now she's at the Fletcher Maid
Right,
Academy.
right.
Yeah, so you can do it that way.
Yeah, so there is, there's the actual logistics of it that you can't.
You can't be the superintendent's boss when he's your boss.
Exactly, that does kind of make
You
sense.
probably can't have two salaries from the
worlds will
same
collide.
city.
Yes.
Probably. That's basically it, right? I mean, in a way.
No, it's not
not
quite that
not
way.
that.
I mean,
It's
when Joe Grassi served on the school committee, he was also working, I think at one of the community school programs, or I think it was up at the, the old.
But those are sort of
Fitzgerald
not, it's
building,
not like working right
the
within the
Gately Center.
administration.
Oh,
Yeah.
Maybe.
So so you could do
Probably,
both.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, is it Richard Harding who works for the
men's health.
so it's a part of the health commissioner.
Yep.
Right. So he's actually employed by the city in that regard, but there are certain situations where you
Yeah,
might
probably.
have to
Maybe if
you
it's
know,
more closely
not
related
vote
to
on
it.
something
Yeah, right.
like a budget or something if
Yeah.
there was a conflict. But
Yeah, no, it's funny that you bring this up because actually just the other day I was having a conversation with someone about, they asked me would I get back into teaching if I was to be elected, and I told them definitely at some point in my career, but really personally I believe school committee takes a full-time approach to it.
And they pay you enough to be full-time, I think.
Well, no, school committee's not so much a full-time salary, but it's a healthy.
No,
Hey,
it's gone up. It's not 35,000. It's more than
It's
that,
in
isn't
the
it?
it's in the ballpark.
I
of
think, I mean, the way I explain it to
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
I'll just say that I know there's people like myself and many others that work in the district that work full-time,
Right.
not just during the school year, but
Right.
also over the summers
Right,
and after
right,
school,
right.
and still make less than that.
No, absolutely.
and-
No, that's
and
what I'm
that's-
saying.
and
So
that's-
you
yeah,
could live,
definitely.
a single person with no dependents probably
Right.
could live on it.
Now I want to get into a little bit onto some of the particulars of
Yeah, yeah.
the stand for
Other
whatever,
issues,
but
yeah.
let me just ask a pure political question first.
Yes.
So the thing is we do run with PR elections, and part of winning PR elections is you sort of have to have identifiable constituencies. Some candidates do sort of a broadcast approach, whatever. Are there any particular parts of the city or constituencies that you feel are more likely to vote for you?
That's a great question. I think there's some that I would hope for. I think that there's all the people that I've met and known through my work just throughout the city, that have seen me put in the hard hours, seen me not just during the school day, but I would also do things like I would come in early so I could open up the computer lab for students so that they could learn coding in the morning.
Oh, that's great.
Or I would go to all of our school events and things like that.
So you got to meet parents, which
oh,
is
yeah.
important. Parents that are voters.
Yeah, and so it's definitely that. I've also done a lot of work in the after-school community as well.
Right.
I both teach after school and I also train after-school teachers.
Wow.
And so I think there's those kinds of communities. But I'm very much trying a very broad approach this election. I learned a lot from last election.
Yeah.
And I think I did pretty well. I got around 1,200 votes, a little
You
bit.
did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. No, it was
Quota was what?
Well,
Oh, okay.
remember, school committee.
Yeah,
School
school committee is a little bit lower, and it's less
Right.
candidates, so like it's actually
Good.
yeah.
But
So
still, that's pretty good.
yeah, no, I was really obviously I was disappointed that I lost, but
Yeah.
I was happy with my first showing. But one of the things I learned from the last election was about kind of all the people in the city and how they interact with local politics, and I really put a lot of thought into it and realized that I don't know if and it's really with your data that I'm able to do a lot of this work. But it's what is it, 17,000?
Well, 1-800-DATA.
Yeah. It's
No, I do just so those who know, I do provide a lot of the voter database and stuff for people.
yeah, but it's what, 17,000 give or take.
Last time it was something.
Not everybody
like,
votes for school
yeah,
committee.
yeah.
You know, we got about 18,000 people voting in the last election. A little shy of 18,000. I think it'll go up a little bit this year.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
But how many registered voters? About 60, 65?
64,
Really?
something
That
like
many?
Yeah.
about
Registered
64,000, something like that.
Yeah, so there's about
That's a
30 to
big
40,000 voters that I think aren't necessarily
Yeah.
engaged with local politics.
Right.
And I put a lot of thought in trying to figure out why
Right.
that might be. and one of the biggest takeaways that I had was I think it's the use of voter data for a lot of the campaigns. So
yeah, you mentioned that in your
yeah, and it's something that, you know, this isn't just local campaigns. This is state, federal.
Right,
all
sure.
campaigns use voter data.
Right.
Voter history data.
Voting history data. That's
Exactly.
right.
Who has voted in the past?
Exactly. So that the people that they go when they canvess, they're knocking on the doors
they're
of
targeting
people who have previously voted.
and not people that haven't voted.
Exactly.
Well, actually, a lot of campaigns will actually go after the most likely voters, people who already vote. They also often will target new registrants because they figure if somebody was jazzed to register, then they're maybe available and they're not committed to anybody yet.
Yep.
So there's a lot of targeting that goes on.
Yeah, but my approach this election has been pretty blanket. I'm not using voter data history to decide where I'm knocking. When I go out canvassing, I'll pick a street and I'll knock on every door up and down as much as I can.
The candidates pay for that data though, right? When they get it from
yeah, you know, you can get it free from me. You can get it free from the election commission.
I know when I've canvassed.
Well, they got a thing they call the Voter Activation Network.
Yeah.
There's these other bits of software, which is basically the same data they get from me, packaged into a nice user interface, and it'll cost you $1,700.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is the prohibitive cost that comes with using that. The other thing I'm trying to do with my campaign is figure out how to do it in as much as a cost-effective means, so that it could potentially be replicable for, you know, just like, I'll tell you this, in no way do I consider myself, I mean, I am a politician, but when
Not a career politician.
Not a career politician. And when I got into this, I knew nothing about how any of that worked.
Yeah.
And you know, it was a steep learning curve the first election. And what I realized is I don't think many people know how the inner workings of campaigns are.
That's probably true.
And that's kind of another part of my campaign, is to try to help make it a little bit of an educational experience, and also a little bit of showing people that it can be done in a cost-effective way, and just with a lot. And don't get me wrong, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of knocking on doors and up and down streets.
Retail, they call it
retail politics.
Retail politics, which in local campaigns is really everything.
That's key.
You can, you know, I've known people who spend fortunes for billboards. I don't think it scored a money.
Well, even the president. I mean, Obama actually was on top of that, because I campaigned for Hillary in 2008, and I could see we'd go to these places in Pennsylvania, and he had already had the door knocker things all over the place.
Yeah. There's a lot of tools available these days that help, but you know, but I agree that, you know, there are a lot of unreached people out there, and if all you do is focus on the usual suspects, first off, some of them are already committed.
Oh yeah, totally.
You know, so honestly, going for somebody who always votes means they're always voting for somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. They're usually already accounted for.
Exactly.
And you know, I'll tell you one other thing that I've really noticed during this. You often sometimes come across people who can't vote in our city.
That's true.
And a lot of their times, their first reaction to me is that it's not worth my time to be talking to them.
Right.
And
be a favor. Knock on the next door.
Exactly. But I always follow that up with, well, do you have kids in the school? And when they do, you know, I still think it's really important to have conversations with
I agree.
Yeah. So
now again, my personal feeling is that voters vote for the person. Primarily not for the issues they espouse, but the issues do matter to some degree. So are there any particular things that really you're particularly jazzed about that motivates you as a candidate?
Oh yeah. Yep. I would say first and foremost, communication.
Yeah, I saw that a lot in your
I tend to use it probably a little bit too much, but that's just to stress how important I think it is.
You talked about subcommittees. Now they don't have subcommittees.
They do.
There was one time they did. One time they didn't.
Oh really?
I think it was when Tom Fowler Finn came in as a school superintendent. They took a vote to not have any subcommittee, and some people were outraged about it.
So they have them, but you talked
about. But I actually found it in 1921 newspaper. The first vote of the school committee when elected is they agreed not to have subcommittees. So it is not unprecedented to not have subcommittees.
Yeah, but you're right. I do talk a lot about subcommittees.
So what's the story of it? Why do you?
So I kind of see subcommittees as a potential opportunity, as a place for community engagement, and actually to serve as a vehicle as communication.
So more to go to where people are and
open
meetings, or
a little bit of that, and a little bit of having people come and participate in subcommittee meetings. So like inviting in students and families and teachers, all the people that
like
are most
a round
affected.
table in a way.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And then from there to be crafting and developing policy that's more reflective of our community because we're working on it with the community.
You can dig deeper into particular
Yeah.
issues and concerns in committee meetings than you can at like the Tuesday nights
Yep.
school committee meeting.
Exactly.
Right.
And then it's the other end of things too, though, Judy, and that's what
Yeah.
you were talking about as far as going out to people and
Sure.
having conversations with people. I call it reverse office hours. But
Yeah,
it's
so I like that.
yeah, it's basically.
So having like a committee meeting, not always at the high school? Or just,
That's definitely something to
yeah, or just having
explore.
extra meetings.
I would say even meetings with the sole purpose of listening and getting feedback, and
Right.
for school committee members probably to do a little bit less talking and
More
just kind
outreach.
Of,
or
yeah,
to
just
like,
getting
what's
a
on
lot
your
of,
mind?
My theory is school
Yeah.
committee people do that once every 2 years. For a period of a few months. It's
Yeah,
called
when they're
running for election.
that's
When they do the listening tours.
well,
listen, that's what it is. So that's a
Yeah.
good point, though. So to have it more as part of the structure.
yeah, and part of
Huh.
the practice and
Make it
community
regular.
engagement.
Yeah.
Yep.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, we need to do that more.
So that's definitely one of the major issues that I.
Is that, and that's not brought up at all in this, I don't know much about the district plan framework, which you support, but does that ever mentioned in it?
Yeah, they definitely do talk a lot about family engagement
Okay.
and things like that. And I think the district framework plan was created to serve as this guiding point of strategic objectives and initiatives. And then
Right.
what will be interesting to see is how they're actually followed up and how it's done through action plans. And that's what I'm excited about.
How old is it? I mean, when
Just over this past year.
So
They put it together. They had what, in my time and following
Yeah.
these things, I would say is one of the more inclusive processes, where they got lots of different stakeholders, they came together, they created all of the stuff, and then really just saw a lot of support, I think, from the community about it.
Was this an initiative of the school committee or of the school administration?
This was of the school
This- the new
administration.
superintendent,
Yeah, this is
right? Yeah.
Dr. Salim's
Yeah, right.
approach and new plan. And and I think part of that also includes a lot of his work for his entry plan, where he visited all the schools, had conversations with people.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little quick thing that I really appreciated.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed when he was visiting our school at Cambridgeport,
Yeah.
he took the time to sit and have lunch with the students.
Yeah.
And that to me is really important because, I think the students are sometimes the most themselves when they're either at recess and lunch.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
that's
I hate to
important.
say it, but really, to me, isn't that like, didn't they be doing that? I don't know. I mean,
But
it
it's
seems
sort of
to me.
interesting. Sometimes, there's something that after the fact seems obvious. They go, why didn't we think of this?
Yeah. But yeah, so
Like
that.
principles that.
Oh, I mean, I think
just,
principles are definitely in there, but
Okay.
I mean.
No, that, I mean, yeah.
Seeing Dr. Salim, I think it was
Sure,
the
yeah.
first time that I've seen a
Definitely.
superintendent
That's
really sit
great.
with students and talk like
Yeah.
that. But and then I was saying another important issue that I care a lot about is assessments and really trying to identify and understand their role in our schools. And I think a lot of the times when I bring this up with people, they might assume that I'm, totally against assessments. That's not the case at all.
Which means tests.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, I know. You gotta use
No,
that.
I mean, we're in the business, so
Yeah.
I know the shifting language.
Yes,
right?
of course. And really, there's only so much at the school committee level we can do
Right.
about the state exams with as far as
Sure.
MCAS and
Right.
things like that,
Yeah.
and Park.
Yeah.
But I think
What are
there's
we using now, by the way?
it's MCAS 2.0 is
Right.
is what
MCAS
it's called.
2.0.
And so there, we spend a lot of time in graduate school learning about how to assess our students, especially our particular set of students that we're working with. And I don't know if teachers are always given the freedom to use a lot of that knowledge and experience that they get to do it as freely as they would like. And I think that's, one of the things when I talk about assessments, like really having a serious conversation about it, including teachers, and also including families and students, because I think students' input on assessments is
So that would
important
be
as
a
well.
good listening kind of meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I love the types of testing that shows a lot of hands-on learning, so project-based learning.
Right.
Portfolios is a great way to kind of get students to reflect on their own work and see growth in that way. But there also does need to be occasionally periodic assessments, I would say, making sure that students are on track.
Okay.
But it's definitely, the question is how much, how often, what are the assessments, and what are we doing with that data afterwards?
What are you measuring, really?
Yeah, what are you measuring, and what is that data being used for, and are we using it in a way that really follows the students throughout their school lifetime, or is it just kind of a little bit more pocketed?
What, I should have asked this earlier because
Yeah.
time's running out, but there's been some discussion about math. We have a mathematician over here. Tracking and mixed ability. I'm just curious.
I mean, at what point does
Right.
a leveling become appropriate?
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems to be an issue here.
I think it's a really difficult issue.
Yeah.
I am in no ways a
I mean, you've
math.
been in the classrums.
Yes, I've been in the classroom. I in no ways a math teaching expert.
No.
I definitely have taught my fair share of math, but I think as far as leveling and things like that, the toughest thing, or one of the toughest things about teaching, is differentiating your instruction. And that means providing different supports for the different levels of students you might have in your class. And there's definitely some teachers that prefer having more homogeneous kind of classes where it's all close to the same ability. But then there's also teachers that I think appreciate having multiple levels of students.
But
so
wouldn't
that
it depend on their support though within that?
Exactly, and I think
more aides or something.
if we're really talking about it, I think it becomes an issue of
staffing.
And really, I think if you want to do it well, it's co-teaching is the best way to do it. Yeah, we're running out.
All right.
This is going so quick.
This is your chance to
Yeah.
make your pitch.
All right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked a lot already about what I think kind of differentiates me, both between my past experiences, a lot of what I'm talking about that I would do on it. I would encourage you, if you want to find out more information about me, to check on the candidates page. I just updated my Robert Winters questionnaire, which is
10 seconds.
Yep.
Right.
And check my website, votejdcrutchfield.com.
Yeah.
Number.
Oh, and vote for me, number one for school committee. Thanks out. Take care.